Welcome, Seekers of Wisdom, to Day 30, the final step in our 30-day Wisdom Quest Challenge. And yet, this is no final chapter. It is the end of a beginning, the threshold to a greater, deeper journey. What we close today is not a door, but a circle one that spirals outward, not inward. This is the point where what was once theory must become practice, where reflection must become embodiment, and where the questions we have asked must begin to shape the answers we live. This is not a ceremony of completion. It is an invocation, a calling forth of your wiser self into the world you must now engage with new eyes, new hands, and a new heart. We did not arrive here overnight. For the last 29 days, we have explored the vast, intricate, and often uncharted inner landscapes of the human soul. We ventured into deserts of doubt, where we confronted the absence of answers and learned to befriend uncertainty. We scaled the peaks of discipline, where we found structure not as confinement, but as freedom. We walked the tangled forests of introspection, where each shadow cast was a teacher, each clearing a moment of clarity. And we sailed the churning seas of transformation, where storms humbled us and still waters renewed us. With every sunrise, we uncovered a new truth. With every dusk, we laid to rest an old illusion. Each day brought a new map to unfold, a compass to calibrate, and an ancient, forgotten truth to reclaim. We did not merely acquire knowledge, we walked with it, sat with it, and let it reshape us from within. And now, we return not to the world as it was, but to the world as we are now, not perfect, but awake. Not finished, but formed. But what is the purpose of all this if it ends with us unchanged? What is the point of confronting our shadows, listening to our inner wisdom, and waking the silent corners of our consciousness, only to return to our old patterns, our old noise, our old narrative? What is the value of insight if it lies dormant, like a seed never planted or a song never sung? What is the use of wisdom if it doesn't leave fingerprints on the life we are living, if it doesn't ripple outward into our relationships, our work, our choices, our communities? Wisdom is not meant to be hidden. It is meant to be lived, embodied, and shared not as grand declarations, but in quiet, persistent ways. In how we speak to the cashier, how we listen to our children, how we breathe when the tension rises. Wisdom is not for display, it is for action. And so, this final day is not an end. It is a rite of passage, a crossing over. It is the ceremonial moment when we shed the skin of passive learning and become active stewards of what we now carry. We return not merely with ideas, but with presence, with a stillness forged in the fire of reflection, with a compass that no longer seeks approval or applause, but truth and alignment. We return to the world not as students grasping for answers, but as apprentices of wisdom, humble, curious, and committed to the path. Our eyes are unclouded, not because we see everything clearly, but because we are no longer afraid to see what is there. Our hearts are more whole, not because they are unbroken, but because they have become sanctuaries for both sorrow and joy. And our feet are ready not to run, but to walk deliberately, one grounded step at a time, upon the path of conscious living. This is the beginning of a new era of your life. A life lived not by default, but by design. A life not driven by reaction, but rooted in intention. You have not arrived, you have awakened. And now the world awaits, not for your perfection, but for your participation. The journey continues. And now, it's real. Prologue echoes from the past before we arrive at the festival, before the bonfire is lit, before the sacred circle is formed, before the stories are spoken aloud and carried on the wind. We must remember, not just as a ritual of sentiment, but as a conscious act of reverence. We must remember where we began, because every transformation demands that we honor the threshold we first stepped across. Without the memory of our starting point, we cannot truly comprehend the magnitude of our journey. This path was never about collecting wisdom like coins, but about returning to the deepest questions of our lives with new eyes and a steadier hand. And so we begin again, not to retrace our steps in sorrow, but to acknowledge fully and without flinching how far we've come. Kai, the luthier, once lived as a hollow chamber of sound, reverberating endlessly with the noise of the world. In the city of echoes, his identity was a symphony composed by others. He was not a man of music, but of mimicry. A word from a stranger could derail his day. A look from a parent could shape his week. Every critique became gospel. Every compliment became pressure. He had no silence of his own, only borrowed thoughts, borrowed rhythms. He mistook reaction for authenticity. He was a puppet of tone and tension, his strings pulled by forces he didn't understand. His soul longed to sing its own note, but the echoes drowned him before it could rise. Anya, the glassblower, lived encased in translucent beauty, a world where symmetry was salvation and fracture was failure. Her every creation was a test of her worth. She chased perfection with the intensity of someone trying to outrun shame. Each time the glass cracked, it echoed a deeper break inside her. And so, she sealed herself off in a crystalline fortress, impeccable from the outside, but cold within. She feared vulnerability more than pain, and so she became untouchable. Her art was her armor. Her flawlessness was her prison. The world applauded, but she was starving for real connection, terrified that one misstep, one flaw, would reveal the fragile humanity she had worked so hard to hide. Lyra, the alchemist, was driven by an insatiable hunger for the extraordinary. She was convinced that gold alone could redeem her suffering. She rejected the lead in her life, the slow days, the messy failures, the unglamorous effort, and called it all a waste. She wore her ambition like armor, and her impatience like a crown. She wanted the light, but not the heat. The result, but not the refinement. She looked down on her own pain, judging it unworthy of transformation, unaware that her fire was not in the treasure she chased, but in the crucible she avoided. Her wisdom was always waiting, just beyond the discomfort she refused to enter. Orion, the mapmaker, wandered in the fog not because he lacked intelligence, but because he lacked permission to trust himself. He had been taught to follow, to consult the maps written by others, to listen to voices that did not know the terrain of his soul. Every choice felt like a trap. Every deviation from the right path a disaster waiting to happen. He feared the unknown more than he feared the known pain, so he stayed still. He lingered in indecision, so long that the fog became familiar, almost comforting. The idea of choosing even, if it meant freedom, felt like too much weight for one pair of feet to carry. Kale, the clockmaker, lived surrounded by precision, but with no one to share time with. His tools were orderly, his tower immaculate, but his heart ticked in a room that had not heard laughter in years. He thought that by mastering the rhythm of time, he could avoid the chaos of relationship. But mastery became monotony. He built walls to protect what mattered to him, only to realize that in doing so, he kept out everything that gave life meaning. Time became currency, and generosity a threat. He watched others from afar, convinced they would disrupt his peace. But in truth, his solitude had calcified into sorrow. Elias, the stonemason, etched names of the dead with reverence, but carried no belief that his own life would be remembered. His hands carved memorials for others, yet he thought himself unworthy of memory. He gave endlessly quietly, faithfully, but believed his offerings were invisible, that he would vanish without legacy. He lived like the stone he worked with, enduring, sturdy, but unnoticed. He thought greatness meant being remembered by many. He did not yet see that a name written on the heart of one's soul can be more enduring than one carved into monuments of granite. And you, the listener, you who arrived not in triumph, but in quiet hope, or perhaps in weariness. Maybe you began this journey with doubts curled around your bones, with questions too heavy to carry alone. Perhaps you came seeking something you could not name, only sense. Maybe you were mourning something, a version of yourself that no longer fit, a life that no longer sang, a dream that never unfolded. Or maybe you were simply curious, willing, open, even just a crack. You may have come holding shame like a stone in your chest, or fear like a whisper you couldn't silence. You may have come secretly, unsure whether you belonged on such a path. But you came. You took the first step. You listened when you could have turned away. You stayed when discomfort arose. You chose truth over habit, growth over safety, wisdom over approval. You walked into your own fog, into your own silence, into your own reflection, and you kept walking. You faced old ghosts and quieted old noise. You sat with grief, with anger, with emptiness, and you didn't run. And now look at you. You are not who you were. You carry new eyes, eyes that see with compassion and clarity. You carry new breath, deeper and steadier. You carry new questions, and better yet, you carry the courage to live inside those questions without rushing toward answers. You have walked from echo to voice, from perfection to authenticity, from ambition to alignment, from fear to presence, from silence to service, from invisibility to impact. You have not arrived at the end. You have arrived at yourself, and from that center, the real journey begins. The valley of the unfolding map, once each cycle, when the veil between seasons thins, when the moon pauses in her arc, when the earth inhales in the hush between breath and blossom, there gathers in the center of the four great realms a festival unlike any other, the festival of the unfolding map. It is not bound to a date, nor bound to a place as most understand places. It emerges where wisdom calls and readiness answers. It is not sought, it is found by those who have dared to seek inward. This is not a festival of performers or poets, though many there speak in rhythm. He walks with the rhythm of someone who no longer fights the tempo of life. Across his back, two instruments, one of his own making polished, taut, resonant, and one ancient, marked by time, its frets long worn smooth by generations of fingers. He is no longer here to perform. He is here to offer resonance. He walks as a student of silence, one who has learned that the most powerful music begins in the breath before the first note. It is not a retreat or a summit, though it may contain revelations and summits of spirit. It is a convergence of lived truths, a communion of lives shaped not by doctrine, but by transformation. This valley green, open, endless in its quiet welcome, has no name on any traditional map. Cartographers have tried to mark it. Their ink disappears. The trees are tall, not because they grow quickly, but because they have waited patiently. The soil holds the footprints of thousands who came before, not pressed in with ego, but left behind with grace. The sky feels both vast and intimate, as though it has heard your every thought and still opens above you in welcome. This is the sacred geography of return. Not return to a place, but return to a self you forgot was waiting. GPS signals fade at its borders. It exists beyond coordinates, beyond claims. Its location shifts, not in space, but in spirit. You do not come here because you plan to. You come because you are finally ready, not perfect, not pure, not enlightened, but open. This place reveals itself only to those who have begun to walk without armor. It whispers to those who have dropped the map that was handed to them and begun to draw their own. Here, the air carries a hush not of silence, but of reverence. And as the sun rises spilling light like liquid gold over the surrounding ridgelines, the mist parts slowly with the ceremony of something holy. And the seekers begin to arrive. They do not march in procession. They do not wear banners or titles. They come in ones and twos and small, weathered groups, some on foot, some in carts, some with hands empty, others bearing gifts. All of them carry stories. All of them bring silence and sound in equal measure. They do not come to be seen. They come to be received. From the stone-carved paths of the City of Echoes, Kai arrives. His pace is neither hurried nor hesitant. He walks with the rhythm of someone who no longer fights the tempo of life. Across his back, 2 instruments, one of his own making polished, taut, resonant, and one ancient, marked by time, its frets long worn smooth by generations of fingers. He is no longer here to perform. He is here to offer resonance. He walks as a student of silence, one who has learned that the most powerful music begins in the breath before the first note. Anya crests the southern pass, her cart trembling softly with the shimmer of light through glass. Every step of her journey has etched a story into the objects she brings. Her glassworks glow, some cracked, some whole, all radiant. But at the center of her cart stands the glass tree, her once shattered masterpiece. Where it broke, it now gleams with golden seams, each fracture an illumination. Once hidden, it is now her proudest truth. She walks beside it not as a maker of perfection, but as a priestess of mending. She comes not to protect her art, but to teach others how to mend what they feared was ruined. Lyra enters from the north, her garments plain, her satchel heavy. Inside are stones dull, coarse, ignored by most, lead, but not to her. To her, each stone is a promise, a beginning, a lesson. She no longer curses the rawness of her life. She reveres it. The gold she once chased has become irrelevant. What matters now is the process, the fire, the pressure, the patient transmutation. She carries no elixirs. Her magic is not in results, but in how she has learned to sit with suffering and extract its hidden wisdom. Her presence is not dazzling. It is grounding. Orion walks with others young, tentative seekers whose steps still carry the uncertainty of recent awakening. His own stride is no longer burdened by the need to direct. His towers, once sealed and sterile, now pulse with life, laughter, mentorship, exchange. He comes not to showcase invention, but to share the sacred simplicity of giving time. From rebirth, from long winters of the soul, some arrive with instruments made of bone and mark. Some with scrolls of teachings hard-won in solitude. Some come just with stories. Some come only with scars. They are midwives of insight, blacksmiths of identity, weavers of lineage, carriers of broken dreams, now stitched into new shapes. He understands now that solitude can be sacred, but only when it prepares us to rejoin the world more generously. His presence feels like home-worn, rhythmic, enduring. His map is simple, worn, marked by hand, not as an authority, but as a suggestion. He gestures more than instructs. His joy is no longer in being followed, but in seeing others find their own compass. He has learned that the best map is one made in collaboration with the unknown. He has become a cartographer of courage, not certainty. Kale arrives with a cart of humble treasures. Bread still warm, clocks ticking gently, blueprints smudged by shared hands. Elias follows, last. No cart, no display, no spectacle. Only a man, aged and quiet, whose presence causes the wind to still. He carries nothing, but he brings everything. His life etched not in marble, but in moments. It only asks one thing. Have you walked honestly with your own pain? Have you returned with something to offer, not to prove, but to give? It is this offering, not perfection, that makes one worthy of arrival. In eyes lifted, in small kindnesses remembered by those he will never meet again, his silence speaks fluently in gratitude. The valley welcomes him not as a guest, but as one of its architects. And still others come, from villages without names, from cities too vast to remember. They come from grief, from rebirth, from long winters of the soul. Some arrive with instruments made of bone and bark. Some with scrolls of teachings hard-won in solitude. Some come just with stories. Some come only with scars. They are midwives of insight, blacksmiths of identity, weavers of lineage, carriers of broken dreams now stitched into new shapes, and the valley receives them all. It does not sort or separate. It does not assign roles. It does not ask for credentials or resumes. It only asks one thing. Have you walked honestly with your own pain? Here, wisdom is not taught from a podium. It is shared over bread, traded in silence, spoken between tears and firelight. Here, maps are not drawn to escape the unknown. They are drawn to invite it in. Have you returned with something to offer, not to prove, but to give? It is this offering, not perfection, that makes one worthy of arrival. The festival of the unfolding map is not about grandeur. It is not a summit of the enlightened. It is a reunion of the real. And so, the seekers gather not in rows, not in hierarchy, but in circles. Their paths have converged not by coincidence, but by coherence, with the electricity of 1,000 journeys arriving at the same threshold. This is the place where maps unfold not to dictate the future, but to reflect the path walked so far. And from this unfolding, something new will rise. Something within them has aligned. And though they come from different worlds, they carry a shared heartbeat, a longing to contribute, a readiness to begin anew, a vow to leave behind the story of who they should be and step into the life they are finally ready to live. The bonfire has not yet been lit, the rituals have not yet begun, but the valley is already alive. It hums with purpose, with presence, with the electricity of 1,000 journeys arriving at the same threshold. This is the place where maps unfold, not to dictate the future, but to reflect the path walked so far. And from this unfolding, something new will rise. New characters among the many pilgrims who quietly step into the valley of the unfolding map. There are those who do not stand out by appearance or reputation, but whose presence shifts the air. These are not celebrities of the spiritual world, nor performers of insight. They are carriers of lived truths, shaped by fire, loss, and long roads of becoming. He has the posture of a man who once trained for war, but the eyes of someone who now serves life. His body is scarred, not only from battles fought on the field, but from the inner war between the person he was and the person he longed to be. There was a time when Torin lived by code and conquest, when strength was measured in dominance and fear was tucked beneath discipline. But that path brought him no peace. In a moment of stillness, after a skirmish that left him wounded but awake, laid down his weapon and picked up a bundle of herbs. He became a healer not out of ideology, but out of necessity. He apprenticed under those forgotten by empires. Wise women in villages, old men with trembling hands, children who knew where the medicine grew. Now he carries a satchel of roots, oils, and salves. But more than that, he carries presence, the steady, healing calm of someone who has chosen not to destroy. His touch is firm but kind, his voice low, unwavering. He says little, but every word is earned. They do not arrive with polished speeches or grand philosophies. They arrive as living questions, complex, unfinished, luminous. Their stories are not recited, they are embodied, and in the subtle gravity of their being, they invite others to go deeper. Seren is one of the first to arrive. She walks slowly, deliberately, as if each step is a line of verse written on the path beneath her feet. Her face carries both softness and sorrow, the kind of dual expression that only emerges in those who have survived their own unraveling. Years ago, Seren lost someone she loved not to death, but to the quiet disappearance that grief brings. Her world became a room without walls, echoing with memory. For a long time she tried to outrun the ache, but it waited for her everywhere. Eventually, she stopped running. She sat down. She wept, and then she began to write not to heal, but to survive. Her poems were not crafted, they arrived like rain. They were jagged, unfinished, sacred. Now she carries with her a blank journal, one she offers freely to those who have not yet found words. She says, "Grief never leaves. it changes shape. And when we stop fearing its voice, it sings. Her presence is a quiet sanctuary for others in mourning, not a cure, but a companion. Torin, the once warrior, walks in later, his stride wide and grounded. He has the posture of a man who once trained for war, but the eyes of someone who now serves life. His body is scarred, not only from battles fought on the field, but from the inner war between the person he was and the person he longed to be. A monk who once lived in the rarefied silence of mountaintops, who chanted mantras before dawn and fasted for weeks to master detachment. They do not seek to be at the center. They create space at the edges, where others feel safe enough to enter. They do not lead by instruction. They lead by embodiment. They carry no banners, but something about them feels ancient, as if they've walked this path before in another life and chosen to return to help others along the way. But he began to notice something, that all his enlightenment meant little if it could not survive the sound of a crying baby or the chaos of a crowded street. So one day, without drama or defiance, he left. He walked down the mountain and into the market. And there, in the noise, the distraction, the rush, he practiced. He meditated in subways. He taught breathwork to street vendors and sanitation workers. He watched people argue and learned how to stay present with heat. What is stillness, he asks, if it cannot hold motion? He wears ordinary clothes now. His presence isn't flashy. But when he sits beside you, the world slows down. And when he listens, it feels like the first time someone ever truly did. There was a time when Torin lived by code and conquest, when strength was measured in dominance and fear was tucked beneath discipline. But that path brought him no peace. In a moment of stillness, after a skirmish that left him wounded but awake, he laid down his weapon and picked up a bundle of herbs. He became a healer not out of ideology, but out of necessity. He apprenticed under those forgotten by empires. Wise women in villages, old men with trembling hands, children who knew where the medicine grew. Now he carries a satchel of roots, oils, and salves. But more than that, he carries presence, the steady, healing calm of someone who has chosen not to destroy. His touch is firm but kind, his voice low, unwavering. He says little, but every word is earned. Then there is Imari, the blind cartographer. She arrives from the forests, her path carved not by sight, but by sense. Her staff touches earth in a rhythm older than memory. She cannot see the valley as others do, but somehow she sees more clearly than most. Her maps are etched into memory, into texture, into the subtle shifts in wind and ground. When she meets you, she doesn't study your face, she listens to your silences. Her hand may brush your shoulder or linger briefly at your wrist, and in that moment she reads what others overlook: tension, hesitation, hope. Her maps are not of places, they are of people. She says, the terrain inside us is far more complex than any mountain. My gift is not seeing it all, but trusting that it can be felt. She guides others not by command, but by walking beside them until they begin to recognize their own path. And from the crowded cities and quiet temples alike, Nalan arrives. A monk who once lived in the rarefied silence of mountaintops, who chanted mantras before dawn and fasted for weeks to master detachment. But he began to notice something, that all his enlightenment meant little if it could not survive the sound of a crying baby or the chaos of a crowded street. So one day, without drama or defiance, he left. He walked down the mountain and into the market, and there, in the noise, the distraction, the rush, he practiced. He meditated in subways. He taught breathwork to street vendors and sanitation workers. He watched people argue and learned how to stay present with heat. What is stillness, he asks, if it cannot hold motion? He wears ordinary clothes now. His presence isn't flashy. But when he sits beside you, the world slows down. And when he listens, it feels like the first time someone ever truly did. Each of these four Sauron, Tauren, Imari, and Nalin arrives not with scrolls or disciples, but with depth. They do not seek to be at the center. They create space at the edges, where others feel safe enough to enter. They do not lead by instruction. They lead by embodiment. They carry no banners, but something about them feels ancient, as if they vow walked this path before in another life and chosen to return to help others along the way. They each carry something precious and difficult. Sauron carries the song of sorrow. Tauren carries the strength of surrender. Imari carries the map of intuition. And Nalin carries the stillness of integration. Together, they form a circle of support, unofficial, unspoken, yet undeniable. People gather near them not to be taught, but to be witnessed. They sit at the fire not to speak first, but to wait until the room is ready. And when they do speak, their words do not rise like speeches. They settle like blessings. Their offerings are not answers. They are doors. Sauron's blank journal invites others to write what they've never dared. Tauren's healing hands restore more than flesh. They restore trust. In a culture infatuated with speed, they move at the pace of sincerity. In a gathering of wisdom seekers, they remind us that true wisdom is not loud, it is lasting. They are not the stars of the festival. They are the roots beneath it. Imari's presence teaches that blindness is not the absence of vision, but the presence of another kind. And Nalin's quiet teachings remind us that awakening is not an escape, but a return. In a world obsessed with experts, they come as elders. And so, they take their places in the valley of the unfolding map, not on pedestals, but in circles. They are there to listen, to hold, to heal, to remind, to offer the kind of companionship that does not rescue you from your path, but walks beside you as you find your own way forward. Festival rituals, the valley of the unfolding map, is not a place of passive arrival. It is a living organism of ritual, reverence, and reawakening. It does not merely receive its visitors. It invites them to participate, to transmute, to become. Rituals here are not performances, nor are they traditions clung to for nostalgia. They are living metaphors, symbolic enactments of deep inner truths. They are portals through which travelers move from one version of self to another. These practices are rooted in silence, more than instruction, presence more than perfection. Some seekers come expecting something grand and find instead something grounding. Others approach the rituals with skepticism, only to find tears streaming down their face moments later. No one leaves untouched. These acts are not about doing them right. They are about doing them honestly. They require only sincerity, not skill. The first that most encounter is called the Path of Threads. Set beneath the outstretched limbs of a vast and ancient tree, its trunk split by lightning, but still thriving, the Path of Threads calls quietly to all who pass. Beneath its branches sits an enormous loom, carved from driftwood and stone, worn smooth by years of prayerful hands. Next to it are baskets overflowing with threads in every hue imaginable, shades that seem to change in the light. Some say the colors are connected to emotions. Others say they are connected to memories. Gold shimmers for gratitude. Red pulses with courage. Indigo speaks of sorrow. White for letting go. Green for rebirth. Violet for insight. The colors seem to choose the hand reaching toward them. Each person who arrives is invited, not instructed, to select a thread that reflects the essence of the wisdom they carry. Sometimes this selection is immediate. Other times, seekers sit for hours, staring into the fibers, waiting until the right one seems to rise to the surface. This is the river of letting go, a narrow but deep stream that winds its way through the valley floor. A name, a belief, a wound, a fear, a version of self that no longer fits. Some write a single word, unworthy, and stop. Others fill the page with a letter they never sent. Some carry their message close to the chest before placing it gently on the surface of the water. The rice paper, thin as breath, begins to melt almost instantly. The ink blurs, the writing vanishes. The water accepts it all without judgment. And as the message dissolves, so does something within the writer. A burden shifts, a tension eases. It is not about forgetting, it is about freeing. It is not about deleting the past, but unbinding the present from its grasp. Its water is crystal clear, always cold, always flowing. It is fed by underground springs said to be touched by moonlight and memory. On its bank are flat stones, placed not by human hands, but by time and intention. Some are perfect for kneeling, others for lying back and letting the sky speak. Along the banks, small writing stations offer rice paper, calligraphy brushes, and ink made from natural elements: charcoal, berries, soil, and salt. When ready, they approach the loom, where a vast and growing tapestry already spreads across the altar. No clear pattern, no symmetry, only story. The act of weaving is slow, intentional. Fingers move like a meditation. As the thread passes through warp and weft, the weaver becomes part of a lineage that stretches backward through time and forward into the unknown. Some speak aloud as they weave, voicing the lesson they bring. Others cry softly. Some close their eyes in silence. But all leave having left a piece of themselves behind, woven into something collective and beautiful, an evolving artifact of human becoming. Nearby, the sound of water can be heard, steady, clear, inviting. This is the river of letting go, a narrow but deep stream. It winds its way through the valley floor. Its water is crystal clear, always cold, always flowing. It is fed by underground springs said to be touched by moonlight and memory. On its bank are flat stones, placed not by human hands but by time and intention. Some are perfect for kneeling, others for lying back and letting the sky speak. Along the banks, small writing stations offer rice paper, calligraphy brushes, and ink made from natural elements: charcoal, berries, soil, and salt. Here, seekers are invited to write down that which they are ready to release. A word, a name, a belief, a wound, a fear, a version of self that no longer fits. Some write a single word, unworthy, and stop. Others fill the page with a letter they never sent. Some carry their message close to the chest before placing it gently on the surface of the water. The rice paper, thin as breath, begins to melt almost instantly. The ink blurs. The writing vanishes. The water accepts it all without judgment. And as the message dissolves, so does something within the writer. A burden shifts, a tension eases. It is not about forgetting. It is about freeing. It is not about deleting the past, but unbinding the present from its grasp. Those who have walked farther, or who feel drawn upward, may climb a winding path that leads to the Tower of Echoes, a stone structure carved directly into the cliff face. From the outside, it appears unremarkable, just a hollow cylinder, open to the sky, or the ones they said that they cannot take back. A phrase held for too long, a name that still haunts, a truth too heavy to speak until now. Some weep before they speak, others leave with trembling smiles. There is no echo back, only release. The tower does not amplify, it receives. And the wind, always present, eventually carries the sound up and away, as though transmuting regret into raw potential. No one stays in the tower long. It does not demand endurance. It simply offers a moment of reckoning and then peace. But inside, the acoustics are unlike anything known. A whisper lingers. A sigh becomes a song. The chamber was not engineered. It was discovered. And it is said to be one of the oldest structures in the valley, older even than the tree. Inside the Tower of Echoes, each traveler is invited to voice a regret, not in confession to others, but in communion with the silence. They whisper into the space the words they never said, or the ones they said that they cannot take back. There is the circle of unanswered questions, a space where seekers write a question they carry, fold it into a stone, and place it in a spiral. They do not seek an answer from others. The ritual is not about solving. It is about honoring the questions we live inside. A phrase held for too long, a name that still haunts, a truth too heavy to speak until now. Some weep before they speak. Others leave with trembling smiles. There is no echo back, only release. The tower does not amplify. It receives. And the wind, always present, eventually carries the sound up and away, as though transmuting regret into raw potential. No one stays in the tower long. It does not demand endurance. It simply offers a moment of reckoning and then peace. But the rituals do not end there. Some are quieter still, hidden like sacred footnotes. There is the circle of unanswered questions, a space where seekers write a question they carry, fold it into a stone, and place it in a spiral. They do not seek an answer from others. The ritual is not about solving. It is about honoring the questions we live inside. There is the lantern walk held at dusk, where those who feel moved may carry a single lantern, walk the path in silence, and then place it in the field of becoming, a clearing filled with flickering lights, each one representing a commitment, a choice, a vow. There is even the breath library, a circular structure where people sit, eyes closed, and breathe in rhythm, while others record the patterns. The breath becomes a language, a scroll, a song. The recordings are never replayed, but kept in a silent archive, an unseen record of the soul's invisible music. All of these rituals, whether thread, water, wind, flame, or breath, share something in common. They are not performances. They are thresholds. They mark the moment when someone stops carrying what no longer serves and starts living with what does. They are not meant to be completed. They are meant to be remembered, returned to, re-entered when the soul calls again. And so the valley does not pulse with noise or pageantry. It pulses with presence. These rituals are how the valley breathes, how it receives, how it gives. They do not change people in spectacle, but in substance, quietly, permanently, one thread, one whisper, one dissolving word at a time. The great circle. As the last rays of sun dip below the cradling mountains, a hush descends over the valley of the unfolding map. It is not the quiet of sleep, but the charged stillness of sacred anticipation. The sky shifts into gradients of deep amber, then into velvet blues threaded with early stars. And slowly, without command or instruction, the people begin to gather. They come from all corners of the valley, those who have shared bread, tears, laughter, silence. Some walk with canes. Others come barefoot. A few arrive in pairs. Most come alone. They do not arrive as strangers anymore. Each step is slow, deliberate, reverent. They form a vast circle around the center of the valley, where wood has been carefully stacked, not by any one person, but by many hands throughout the day. It is not just a pile of timber. It is a ceremonial structure, waiting not for a spark, but for a moment worthy of flame. There are no thrones, no pedestals, no seats of honor, only ground, earth, circle, and breath. There is no outer ring or inner ring. Everyone faces the center. There is no agenda, no leader, only an invitation, silent but unmistakable. If you have carried something into the fire, bring it. If you have shaped something in your silence, speak it. If you have learned something that now asks to be lived, offer it. And so, one by one, they do. Kai stands first, not because he is asked, but because he is called, not by others, but from within. He walks forward slowly, holding his instrument not in hand, but in heart. He does not speak loudly. He does not need to. For years, he begins, I chased the perfect note, believing that mastery would protect me from pain. I tried to control sound so it couldn't surprise me. But the note that changed me was the one I didn't play, the pause between the chords. the place where breath became music. I found peace not in the perfect note, but in the silence between them. He lights a taper. The first flame flickers to life. Anya rises next. Her fingers, once trembling in fear of flaw, now move with grace born of rupture. She steps into the center and unwraps a piece of the glass tree, a shard mended with gold. I used to believe that perfection was strength, that if I broke, I failed. But the storm came, and it shattered everything I had built. I tried to hide the pieces, ashamed of their sharpness. But when I began to mend them, not to erase the break, but to honor it, I found a beauty I had never imagined. My beauty lies not in being whole, but in having been broken and mended. She lights her taper. The flame grows taller. Lyra follows, her satchel filled with heavy, unpolished stones. She takes one out and places it at the fire's edge. I searched everywhere for gold, dug until my hands bled, cursed the weight of the lead in my life. But eventually I realized gold is not found. It is forged from lead, from loss, from love, from sitting with pain instead of running, from embracing the heaviness and saying, "This too is part of me." Her words are slow, like alchemy itself. Her taper brings warmth. Orion, the mapmaker, steps forward with his compass in one hand and a student's sketch in the other. I followed so many paths that weren't mine. I listened to voices that drowned out my own. But then I stopped. I listened not outward, but inward. I drew a map that felt true, not tidy, and I walked it, even when no one else could see the destination. The clearest path is not the one drawn by others. It is the one that aligns with your soul. His taper joins the light. The flames murmur their approval. Kale, once isolated in his tower of time, walks forward with quiet rhythm. In his hands, a loaf of bread. I used to count the minutes, hoard the hours. I thought giving away my time would make me empty. But solitude taught me that time is not meant to be stored. It is meant to be broken like bread and shared. Time, given freely, becomes a meal. Time, hoarded, becomes a prison. Time is not meant to be hoarded. It is a gift. A bread to be broken together. He tears the bread in two, offers it silently to the fire, and lights his taper. Elias steps forward, next not to speak, but simply to be seen. His presence says more than words could. After a long pause, he lifts his face and speaks. I thought legacy was something built in stone, something etched and immovable. I spent my life carving names that would last. But I learned true legacy is planted, not carved. It grows in the hearts you nourish. It spreads in kindnesses no one will ever trace back to you. It blossoms in the lives you touch and never know. He kneels, presses his palm to the earth, and lights his taper. Sareen walks forward slowly, carrying a folded poem. Her eyes are wet but steady. She reads softly. Grief is not a darkness to escape. It is a doorway into depth. It hollowed me. And in that hollow, I planted poems. Each one a prayer. Each one a seed. Grief is not the end. It is the ink of sacred poetry. She places the paper into the fire. The flames accept it like scripture. Torin follows, with steady breath and quiet eyes. He carries a blade not sharp, but symbolic. He speaks, low and sure. The sword I carried cut both ways. It protected. It punished. It took more than it gave. But one day I laid it down, and I picked up the work of healing soft, slow, unseen. It has taken more courage to heal than it ever did to fight. I now carry healing in its place. He lays the blade beside the fire and lights his taper with both hands. Imari, guided by her senses, walks to the center with a steady staff. Her blind eyes face the flames as if seeing clearly. I do not need eyes to see. I walk by trust. I navigate not by sight, but by presence. I feel the shifts in the ground, in breath, in silence. And I have learned vision is not what we see. It is what we are willing to feel. You don't need sight to see. You need trust. Her taper is lit, and in that moment, a breeze stirs. Nalan rises last. The monk who left the mountaintop now stands in the crowd. He closes his eyes, then opens them. Mindfulness is not reserved for temples. It does not belong only to sages and silence. It belongs in traffic, in heartbreak, in the marketplace, in the late-night cry of a child. It belongs to the ordinary, to the messy, to the beautiful chaos of life. Mindfulness is not for the mountaintop. It belongs in traffic, in chaos, in ordinary life. He bows, lights his taper, and sits once more in the circle. And then the fire is fully alive, not just as flame, but as truth. It burns not only with heat, but with meaning, with story, with witnessing, with release. The fire is not just fire. It is transformation made visible. It does not consume. It sanctifies. Around it, the seekers remain, silent, still, some with eyes closed, others watching the embers rise into the deepening sky. A few reach for one another's hands. No words are needed. The circle speaks in breath, in warmth, in presence. Here, in this moment, they are not many. They are one, and the fire listens. The guide. And then, as twilight deepens and the circle settles into a reverent hush, a presence begins to emerge, not with a grand entrance, but with the quiet certainty of sunrise. No footsteps echo, no trumpets sound. Yet every soul in the valley feels it. The air shifts. The stillness thickens. It is not a silence of absence, but one of immense presence. The guide enters. Ilara, known across realms as the Silent Master, the gardener of inner landscapes, the alchemist of sorrow, the wandering teacher, the listener of forgotten songs, the compass who speaks in questions. They are at once ancient and newborn, a paradox of humility and power, timeless and ever-changing. Not one identity, but a mirror through which each seeker sees what they most need. Ilara does not climb a platform, nor do they raise their hands to call for attention. They do not need to. The firelight bends toward them, and the wind falls still as if leaning in to hear. Around the great circle, every heartbeat slows, synchronizing with the quiet gravity of this moment. The seekers, whether seated or standing, instinctively soften their posture. Some close their eyes. Others press hands over their hearts. A few wipe away tears they didn't expect. Something inside everyone recognizes that this is not a speech. It is a transmission. You have journeyed far, Ilara begins, their voice gentle but resonant, the kind that feels like a warm stream moving through stone, but not to arrive at this fire. No, you have not come merely to witness it. You have come to carry it. This is not your ending. This is your ignition. The ember you have cultivated over these many days must now become flame. They pause not for effect, but for digestion, for absorption, for the soul to catch up with the ears. This circle you sit in is sacred, they continue, but not because of where it is. It is sacred because of who you've become within it. This valley is not a place. It is a remembering, a reflection, a rehearsal for the real performance, your life. This map, these stories, these teachings, they are not souvenirs. They are seeds. And tomorrow, your soil awaits. Ilara walks slowly now, eyes meeting eyes, not as a superior, but as a companion. They address the seekers not collectively, but intimately, each word landing like a personal blessing. Let your values guide your decisions, not just when it's easy or admired, but when it costs you comfort, popularity, or applause. When you're tired, tested, and tempted to betray your core, return to your values. They are not chains. They are wings. Let your discipline become daily ritual, not as drudgery, but as devotion. Brush your teeth with presence. Make your bed as a prayer. Light your candle not for the flame, but for the reminder. Turn habit into honor. Let your compassion reach those who challenge you most. Offer kindness where it is least expected. Interrupt cycles of harm with gentle strength. Remember, it is easy to love the lovable. The real art is loving the difficult. The world shifts when you do. Let your clarity disrupt the fog. Be not the loudest, but the clearest. Let your integrity do the speaking when words would only echo. Shine not to dazzle, but to illuminate the next step for someone still stumbling. Let your silence speak when the world screams. There is a roar in quiet that no argument can match. In restraint, there is rebellion. In pause, there is power. Become the calm in the chaos, the anchor in the storm, the hush that heals. Elara stops at the fire, now blazing with the light of many tapers. Sparks rise into the night sky like ascending prayers. Their voice lowers, as if speaking directly into the heart of every listener. You will forget, they say. You will fall asleep again, just as all seekers do. But when you do return here, not to the valley, but to what this place represents. Return to this fire, which now lives in your chest. Return to this circle, which exists in every shared moment of truth. Return to this map not as a guide to follow, but as a question to ask again. They close their eyes, breathing in the warmth of the blaze, as if drawing strength from the very center they helped build. The real quest is not marked by dramatic breakthroughs. It is measured in quiet choices. The decision to breathe before reacting. The courage to listen without defending. The willingness to start over again and again and again. They bow slowly, not above the circle, but into it. A gesture of solidarity, of equal weight. As they step back into the darkness, there is no farewell, only a quiet sense that they are not leaving at all. They are dissolving into everything. The trees, the embers, the night. The fire remains. The message echoes not in words, but in presence. In the tilt of the head, in the softened gaze, in the straightened spine of those who rise from the circle, ready not just to remember, but to begin again. To the listener, and now the guide turns to you. Not to the circle of seekers, not to the fire, not to the well-known faces whose stories you've followed across these 30 days, but to you unmistakably you, the one who has watched, perhaps quietly, from the edges, the one who made time even when time was scarce, the one who stayed even when life pulled hard in other directions, the one who may have doubted their worth, their belonging, or their ability to change. And yet here you are, still standing, still listening, still becoming. Your presence here is no accident. It is part of the great unfolding. The guide's gaze reaches across time and distance. Their eyes are not demanding. They are kind. They are patient. They have seen this moment before, not because it was predestined, but because it is chosen. You have arrived at a crossroads where the inner meets the outer, where the practice becomes the path, where the fire becomes something you carry. You, yes, you, the guide says, not with urgency, but with reverence. You who have journeyed with us not for accolades or applause, but for truth. You who have returned day after day, even when the journey turned inward and hard. You who may not have spoken aloud your transformation, but who have felt it in the architecture of your spirit. You who have gathered these stories, these teachings, like seeds in your pocket, knowing there would come a time to plant them. That time is now. This moment is yours, the guide continues, their words landing like blessings. It does not belong to the past. It does not belong to the future. It is not something to chase or remember. It is now. It is the breath you are taking, the heartbeat in your chest, the flicker of awakening inside you. Claim it not with force, but with love, not with certainty, but with willingness. And then the questions come again, but this time they are deeper. They echo through the chambers of your heart. What flame will you carry, not just today, but on the cold mornings when doubt returns? Will it be the flame of gentleness, of fierce clarity, of radical self-trust? Will you shield it against the winds of cynicism and the downpour of fatigue? What thread will you offer to the world's unfinished tapestry, not because it is expected of you, but because it is yours to give? Will you weave in humor, kindness, accountability, or joy? Will you stitch in honesty where silence once lived? Will your thread bind old wounds or open new doorways? And what regret will you finally lay down like an offering at the altar of this journey? Will it be the one you've carried for years? Too long, too heavy, too close to your identity? Will you name it, bless it, and release it not to forget, but to be free? What wisdom will you now embody, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet rituals of daily living? In how you speak to yourself when no one is watching, in how you hold space for others without fixing, in how you forgive slowly or begin again bravely. What will change, not just in your thoughts, but in your tone, your posture, your choices? The guide's voice softens, but it does not diminish. It deepens. Go now, they say, into your own words, your own truth, your own expression. Go to the comments, yes, share with us. But more importantly, go to your life and live the comment thread in every interaction. Let your life be the message. Let your transformation be the testimony. This bonfire, they remind us again, was never built from timber and spark alone. It was built from vulnerability, from courage, from the willingness of ordinary people to speak what once felt unspeakable. It burns because you are here. It grows because you dare to give it breath. So once more, the final charge is offered not with pressure, but with promise. Let yours be one of them. Let your voice join the story, not as a punctuation mark, but as a new chapter. Let your fire light someone else's way. Let your truth ripple outward in ways you may never see, but that will matter deeply. Because stories save lives. Because one person's shift becomes another's permission. Because you are not alone, and you never were. So take the next step. Speak, write, reach, heal, begin. You already have. Epilogue, dawn. The next morning does not announce itself with fanfare, nor with trumpets of conclusion. Instead, it arrives like a whisper across dew-covered grass, like breath over embers that still glow in the hush of new light. The valley is quiet, not in the way that follows emptiness, but in the way that follows meaning. It is the silence after a great symphony, when the final note lingers and no one dares to speak. The fire that blazed so high the night before now rests in a soft bed of glowing coals, still warm, still alive. Smoke rises not in haste, but in ribbons carrying with it the memories, the laughter, the grief, and the promises spoken in its presence. The great circle has dissolved, and yet its imprint remains etched in the soil, in the air, in the soul. No one is gathered now, not because they've forgotten, but because they remember. Not because they are done, but because they have begun. They are walking. Some walk side by side in easy companionship, their footsteps sensing like verses of a poem still being written. Some walk alone, wrapped in a deep solitude that does not isolate but integrates. They trace old roads with new eyes. They revisit places they once fled from, this time with open palms. They walk through forests and city streets, through crowds and quiet places, and with every step, they leave traces of the flame they carry, subtle but lasting. Some take the winding way, honoring the detours as sacred. Others stride forward with firm resolve, fueled by clarity found in the firelight. They are no longer seeking answers, they are living them. They speak less and listen more. They see differently. They serve without performing. They love without bargaining. They lead without dominating. Each of them carries something invisible and yet unmistakable. It is not a trophy, nor a title. It is not pride. It is presence. They carry with them the distilled wisdom of 30 days of questions asked, truths uncovered, fears named, courage practiced. They carry the soul of the quest, not as theory, but as practice, not as memory, but as action. And you? You awaken not abruptly, but as if your soul has chosen this exact moment to rise. The echoes of the bonfire still live in your chest. You remember not just what was said, but what was felt, what was stirred, what was released, what was reborn. You rise slowly, but surely, feeling the shift in your spine, in your breath, in the very way you stand upon the earth. Something within you has aligned. You reach for your map. It is no longer blank, no longer folded in fear. It is worn with use, alive with annotations, reminders of the deserts you crossed, the mountains you climbed, the tears that softened your soil. There are symbols drawn in margins, phrases circled 3 times, arrows pointing not to destinations, but to thresholds. This map does not guide you outward, guides you inward and forward into the unfolding mystery of a life lived awake. And then the compass. Ah, the compass. It glows faintly, not because it leads you to safety, but because it leads you to truth. Its needle does not obey the pull of iron or geography. It responds only to sincerity. It spins not toward certainty, but toward wholeness. It is lit by the fire you now carry, settle, steady, sacred. You take your first step. It is not grand, but it is real. It is not dramatic, but it is deliberate. The world does not pause for your return, but you do not need it to. You carry enough pause within you now. You walk not into an ending, but into a reintegration. You do not leave the valley behind. You take it with you, in your eyes, in your voice, in your smallest choices. Because this was never a retreat. This was preparation. This was remembering. This was planting a seed so deep that the roots now hold you upright. The quest does not conclude. It transforms. It moves from the fire pit to the dinner table, from the circle to the street corner, from the meditation cushion to the morning commute. It continues in how you listen to someone you disagree with, in how you hold space for someone you love, in how you speak to yourself in the mirror. The quest continues, and this time you are not following. You are leading, quietly, steadily, truly. And wherever you walk next, the path is made sacred by your steps.